In this video, we'll explore the Access naming conventions. Now, this comes from the reference RA, Access Naming Conventions.pdf that you'll find in the reference area on Blackboard. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you there are a lot of different conventions because there are a lot of different things in Access that you can name. But we're not going to name everything. There are certain things that we absolutely have to name. There are other things where it's more optional if you name it, and that's part of this video. I'll point out the things that we have to name and those things that are optional to name. Now, when you open it up, you're going to see it like this typically, where it's very difficult to read because it puts a lot on the screen at one time, so it has to shrink it down. And I'm pretty sure you probably know this already, but you could zoom in on documents from PDF readers or from Word or everything. Usually, there's something on the screen up in the menu bar, the ribbon they call it, that you can click on to zoom in on things. So here it's the plus sign. I can just keep clicking on that till it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. All right. Another thing might depends on your computer and your mouse and all that. But for instance, on my mouse, I could hold down the control key and use the wheel on the mouse to make it bigger or smaller. And I tend to use that after a while. It gets to be second nature. So I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. I went a little bit too far there, so I'm going to bring it down a bit more so you can see it better. Okay, it always moves it to the bottom for some reason when I do that. Here, that's probably good. Now let's go a little bit deeper. Okay, there we go. Too much. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a touch to get it just right. Okay, there you go. That looks good. All right. Everything in Access is considered to be an object. So the tables are objects, the keys are objects, the indexes are objects, the fields that we'll work with are objects, the forms are objects, the reports there are report objects, there are macro objects, there are modules that in themselves are objects. Kind of an odd thing that code is sometimes considered objects, but it is. And then there's certain kinds of queries, select queries and action queries that are objects. Query fields are objects. Controls are objects. The application itself is considered to be an object once it's assembled and compiled. Scripts that use to import information and export information from Access and even send emails are considered to be kinds of objects. And then there's image objects, and then there's some special conventions. And I don't think we'll ever get into these in this class, but it's kind of good to know that they're there. All right. Anyway, let's go back to the top because the major objects that we'll deal with are tables, forms, queries, reports, and macros in this class. Uh, Tables and forms and queries and macros and reports will all need to be named. You will need to name the objects for those. You will need to name those objects, those type of objects. So let's start with tables. They are the kind of the central objects of our database, and the subject table is the one that we'll be doing right off the bat in lesson one, and it's the most important table that we'll do. But I'm going to use that as an example here of how we set up a naming convention for it. When we want to build a subject table, we'll use a object that's in the baseline object library called TBL, and then within curly brackets it says subject on it. That means that this is the template for the subject table. And you'll see its convention is TBL, lowercase tbl, and then a square bracket, and then we got subject and then square bracket. Okay, whenever you see I'm sorry, not square brackets, curly brackets. Whenever you see a curly bracket, that means this is a template, really. Okay, and what you want to do is replace everything including those curly brackets. So everything that's curly bracket, subject, curly bracket. Okay, open to be the name of the table. So, for instance, let's say I want to create a subject table that has records for vehicles that I might own. All right, so that every record in it is a vehicle. So the instances that are represented in there, the subject is vehicle. Again, we don't say vehicles, we don't say plural, we say vehicle. It's what each record represents in the table. That's the subject. So the subject of my table is vehicle. So I would have TBL, and then I would replace this portion right here. I wonder if I could highlight it. I'm going to try and see if I could highlight it well for you guys. Trying to get those brackets are really difficult sometimes when you're doing it on PDF. But anyway, you get the idea. I'm trying to highlight the curly brackets and subject, but I would replace that with vehicle. And here's the example. It would come out TBL vehicle. Now, notice how I did this. It's TBL, 3 letters, lowercase. That indicates that this is a subject table, this object. And then the name of the subject, vehicle. And I started with a capital letter, vehicle. Okay. If I wanted to use more than one word here, I would capitalize each word. So maybe, let's say I was doing a subject for vehicle owners. Okay. I could have TBL vehicle owners and have vehicle, actually owner, I should say. Again, don't make it plural. TBL vehicle owner, capital V, capital O. Now that's not a really good one to do here because typically a vehicle owner would be something like a supplement table or something, or even a junction table that you would have. But let's say we were just having a subject that we call vehicle owner, and we can make a vehicle owner. We would not put a space between between the words. We could put an underscore if you want to. That would be fine. Uh, but I would prefer that you would just say vehicle owner, have it all one string, and have the different words capitalized. Don't capitalize TBL. Don't ever have a space in the name on any of these conventions that you use. You never want to have a space. The reason for that is later on, when Access needs to recognize that subject, maybe it's included in a macro, or it's included in some kind of reference in a rule, or in a conditional format or something like that. If it has a space in it, Access doesn't know where the name begins and where the name ends. What it will do is think it's two different names if it has a space in it, and then it will have real big problems with it. Okay. One of the things that I should have said right off the bat, one of the reasons why we're using naming conventions in this class. Yeah, if you go and you look at the Mastering Access videos, you look at examples that other people do for you and on YouTube and all that, they don't have these prefixes on things all the time. You see some people that follow these, okay, but they may just have a table. They create a table and they call it vehicle and leave it at that. Okay, something like vehicle you probably get away with and do fine. Okay, but let's say that the table was maybe a type or a number or something like that. If you just name the table type or the table number, and we'll especially see this on fields, you can get yourself in big trouble. Those are reserved words in Access, and it turns out what we will name a lot of our fields also tend to be reserved words in Access. So you have to do something else to distinguish that you're talking about an object versus using a reserved word. Okay, reserved words are for things like functions and global variables that are built into Access and all that. And by the way, you don't even know what all those are. So you take a real chance when you don't use the prefix for the naming convention on your objects. You may end up with something that is actually a reserved word, and then when it comes time for you to use it, you'll think you're using it right because all the instructions that Dr. Huffman gave you looks like it should work right. but it doesn't because you actually violated one of the reserved words in access. So that is mainly the big reason that we're going to be using the naming conventions. They keep you from getting into trouble and not being able to debug your applications when you have error messages. Okay. The other reason is it makes it a lot more readable. Okay. Right away, you look at that object's name and you know what that is. I look at anything that's prefixed with a TBL and I know that's a subject table of the database. That's a pretty important thing, you know. So anyway, that's why we want to make sure that we were really stringent about how we name our things, okay? And you will do this throughout the class. There are no if, ands, or buts about this. I will take off points on assignments and projects if you do not follow the naming conventions. At the same time, I do realize that they're not easy to learn to begin with, okay? So for the first assignment, you know, if you have little errors, we won't take off a lot of points. But as long as you showed us you tried, you actually went in here and looked at these things, tried to figure out what it was, and you tried to build it correctly, you'll be okay. You can see on every one of these where I have the object classification, in other words, what type of object it is, the prefix that's associated with it. I give you the convention that you would typically see in the BAL or some other place if it comes up, and then BAL being the baseline object library. I give you an example of, say, you were going to build something with that and how that would look, you know, and I give you some other information about it, you know, what it applies to, things you need to look out for. Definitely read the comments too, okay? So you can see we'll have a subject table, a supplement table, a lookup table, a junction table, an auxiliary table. Those we will all use in this class. When you create those tables, you will name them appropriately. Now you might be able to see that what you name it varies depending on the type of object you have. Okay, a subject, it was just a matter of saying what my subject table is. But when I have a supplement, and we'll get into supplements when we do supplement relationships, you'll create the supplement table. It'll have a different prefix. TSP means a supplement table. You'll name the subject that the supplement is in relationship to, but then you'll give the supplement name itself. And you see the star in between? That doesn't mean wildcard. That means many. Okay, this is telling you right away that this supplement table is a one-to-many between a subject, which happens to be the name of a subject table that we've built into our database, and then what we want to call the supplement. It's really cool. I could look at this and know the relationship immediately that this table is from, just because I went to the effort in naming that. So for instance, vehicles can have yearly taxes. Well, that happens every single year, right? So for every vehicle I have in my database, I may have a yearly tax multiple years out. It says this: a vehicle can be taxed in multiple years, but in any year's tax is for that vehicle only. So, in other words, I'll have a tax for a vehicle, but when I'm taxed on that vehicle, it won't be a tax for another vehicle. It will have its own tax. Hope that makes sense. But if it doesn't, again, we'll get this when we get relationships. So I've got my vehicle table that will be the sending table of that relationship, the subject of that relationship. And then I'll have my yearly taxes, which are supplementing that subject. So there's a one-to-many between vehicle and yearly tax, and we show that one-to-many by using this little asterisk. That means many in this. So we have a supplement table between and it forms the supplement of the relationship between vehicle and yearly tax. Kind of cool, you know. Again, when you get into this, you'll realize just how strong this naming convention is. Another one to many is when we do category relationships, but there it's a little bit different. There you say which one's receiving it first. Basically, uh, uh, again, typically this will be a subject, but it could be any other table. It could be a receiver of a lookup relationship. In fact, you know, truthfully, that's the case with this too. It doesn't necessarily have to be a subject, but most of the time it is. And then we have the category itself. So a little bit reverse from the one before, but there's a reason for that. And we'll talk about that when we do lesson 2. But this is what they call a lookup uh, table. TLK is used for that. Yeah, I know some people are asking, why is it lookup instead of category if it's a category relationship that forms, because that's what Microsoft called it. So I'm trying to be consistent with what they call it. So we'll call it a lookup table, and it's TLK that prefixes it, and you'll have the name of the receiving table. So if I was writing a category field, um, a foreign key field in subject to do a category, uh, then I would have this would be my vehicle, say, and then the category might be type, the type of vehicle. And again, type is a reserved word, so but having it in this structure, there won't be any problem because it knows that it's really all part of this object. If we had just said type, it could be a real problem. That, and also another thing that happens a lot is sometimes you'll have, especially on categories, a similar category on a whole different other subject. So let's say I have a database that has vehicles in it, and I also have in the same database maybe people. Maybe that's another subject, person or whatever. And I have a type of vehicle, maybe I have a type of person. And I want to have two different relationships that both have the name type in it. If I only use type and not had all this other information about what kind of table it is and who's receiving it and all that, and of course telling it is a one to many. If I didn't have that information, I would have to have type one or type two or V type and P type or whatever, something like that, because I couldn't have two type tables then. Okay, I know this may not make a whole lot of sense to you. Again, I'll cover a lot of this as I do relationships and why, but I'm sure this will be a video you'll want to watch several times as you go through the class, and as we go through some of these other things I'm talking about will make a lot more sense to you. But for now, just know that that is how we name that. So, for instance, we have vehicle type. Here's one I did one where the receiver is actually a junction table. So I show the junction moniker there, and then it has a location, the junction. Then there are certain things where it's a universal um, um, category. In other words, the same categories values could be used for several different tables. Then we always say is TLK star building, and that means that this is a something to many. Okay, it pertains to all to whatever it's in relationship to. Okay, you can do that. Okay, we won't see too many of these. I probably more at the end of the class. I'll show you how to do something like this. When you have a category relationship that could be used in multiple relationships. But most of the time, we'll have something like we have where it shows vehicle start type. Make it easy for you. Okay, junction tables, those are tables where we have two different subjects that we bring together to make a many to many. And so we'll have two different subject tables. So maybe I've got not only my vehicle subject table, but I have owner subject table. Okay, and vehicles can have owners, but owners can have more than one vehicle. So that's a many to many relationship. This is how I would structure that. Use the little caret to indicate that it's a many to many situation. Okay, again, the asterisk is one to many. This is a many to many. In naming tables, okay, the asterisk will have a different meaning when we get into fields. You'll see. And then there's the auxiliary table. That's a one-to-one. Okay, it could be something like a vehicle could have an insurance policy. It may not have an insurance policy, but that insurance policy would only be for that vehicle. All right. In other words, you wouldn't have multiple insurance policies. Let's say we're having one of the situations we wouldn't have multiple insurance policies for a vehicle. Okay, but I don't want to have just put the insurance information into the subject table. I want to handle it separately. Then I could build something called a one-to-one, and that's an auxiliary table, and that's TAU. Okay, so these are really the most important things to get named correctly, and your fields. Now, yeah, you can go in and name your keys. When you look at some of the examples that I have for class, you'll see that I had gone in and used KPI and KAI to name my primary key and my alternate key. We'll get into keys here early on in the class and explain what the alternate key and primary key is. Access will generate the label primary key. It does not generate a label called alternate key. I've decided from here on out I'm going to just use what Access generated with this, because it turns out we will never refer to a key in this class. And in fact, even in practice, it's an incredibly rare thing. It's only when you have to manipulate the key as part of creating a different kind of dynamic index, which is way advanced. Okay, we would never do something like that in this class. So I've decided that you don't need to name the keys. We'll just accept the alternate key. Obviously will need to have a name, and there you have the option of either saying KAI and the name of the table that it's in, okay, whether it's a subject or a supplement or an auxiliary, whatever kind of table it's in, you say the name of the table, and that becomes the name of the alternate key. Your option is to just say alternate key like it says primary key that was generated. Okay, the new examples I've been creating for the class use primary key and alternate key to name the keys of the table. We don't have to worry about indexes. Those things that are shown in yellow here are either things that it'd be unusual to do it, or you don't need to do it. There may be a better way to do it, even. Okay, so the ones in yellow, I would just tell you that you probably don't want to ever deal with those. Okay, the ones in red here, you never want to deal with. Okay, why Access even did them, I don't understand. I know that some of them have to do with sharing databases between with other database software, and that's why they're there. And some are just for historic reasons. They used to mean something, they don't anymore, but people still have old databases that they need to work with, so they've carried it through because of that. Okay, but I'm suggesting to you that these ones that are deep red, we just ignore. Again, the convention for this is anything in green. Those things we will likely use in class. The ones that are yellow, we could, or you could, but it's going to be kind of rare. And then the ones in red, I would stay away from. Okay, the light red ones. I can't see a reason for ever having to use those. There's better ways to do it, usually in a lot of cases. So, but it is your option. If you want to use those, you can. Okay. So next to the major objects, the tables, the forms, the queries, the macros, reports, and the other thing we will name the most are fields. In fact, in lesson one, we go through a whole effort where we're going to be mainly creating our first subject table and naming the fields of the subject table. Now, how do we name the sub? Now, one of the things you may have noticed, I should have pointed out when we did tables, they all start with the letter T when you have a table. All right, that's kind of I just did that for consistency, basically, in naming tables. All right. However, there are other things in the database that could start with T that are not tables, but the ones that are tables all start with T. Okay. If I go down here to forms, you'll see they all start with F all the way through. Reports all start with Y. Report objects start with R. Those are report objects. Query objects all start with Q. Macro objects and module objects start with M. Okay, and we'll get into those a bit more as we go through the class. But in fact, we'll do macros much later in the class, but there will be one that will deal with earlier on, and I'll point this stuff out then. Anyway, in fields, there is no real consistency. It doesn't start with F. All right. It depends on the type of field, and in some cases, the type and the format of the field. All right. So the field type that we will use more than anything else in databases is called the short text field. In some databases, it's just called the text field. In fact, in Access, up until just a few versions ago, it was called a text field. And because it changed to short text, I'm giving you an option that you can name it, you could prefix it one of two different ways. The historic way is TXT. Most of the examples you're going to see in this class, because I've had them for a long time, have TXT as the prefix. But you can use STX. That's up to you. STX means short text. Otherwise, just TXT. Again, so for the vehicle, let's say I have the vehicle identification number. It's all alphanumeric, meaning it's a text field or a short text field. You could see that in versions up until 2000, I think 2000, yeah, it says right here, he actually changed the name to short text in 2013. Prior to 2013, you would use you will see people using TXT. Okay, after 2013, most people continue just using TXT, but you will see some that use STX. All right, I will tend to use TXT in this class, even on things after 2013. What's the now? There's another text field called the long text. It used to be called a memo field. What's the difference between the two of them? Short text fields can only have up to 255 characters. Now, I can guarantee you, for most pieces of data that you're going to put into a text field, that is more than enough. All right. But every now and then you may get something where it could be a lot of text that you want to put into a field. We used to call those memo fields. They're now called long text fields. All right. There is a real reason why we have two kinds of text fields, and I will get into that more when we get into the lesson. But for now, know that you will, in my examples, most of the time see MEM, meaning memo, being the prefix for these long text fields. Again, I built them when they were memo fields. I still call them memo fields. It's just force of habit. But you'll also see people have started using LTX. So again, on that naming convention, I let you use either one. It's fine. So then again, now you'll see that there's a thing called number byte, number integer, number long text. Okay, there is a type called number. The problem with number is there could be many different variations in number. It's basically called a format. It's almost like having a subtype. All right. If I put number, just in the old days, they used to just have NUB or NUM, I'm sorry, for number. And the problem with that is I could not just look at that field and know if it was integer or if it was decimal, if it was single, if it was double, whatever. If it was using a percentage, I had to actually go and look at the properties of the field to figure that out. A better way for that is to go down to the format level, basically the subtype level, and say what kind of subtype it is. So a number that's an integer, that will a field that has that's a number type field and it only holds integer values when it holds data, we will prefix with int. And what we always do on all our, I should have said this earlier on when I was talking about text to memo too, we prefix it, we put the name of the table in first in the identifier for the field, and then we give it a field name. So it's the name of the table dash field name. So for instance, before I had this subject table vehicle, TBL vehicle, all right, now I want to create a field in that table called VIN, vehicle identification number, all right. I'm going to make it a text field because the vehicle identification number is alphanumeric. Text fields can contain a combination of alphanumeric characters, alphabetical or numeric. Okay, they could be all numeric. That doesn't make it a number. It's whatever you say it is. And if you say it's a text field, even if you put all numbers in there, it'll be all numbers. All text, those numbers. So I've got the vehicle subject table. Now within that, I want to make a field called VIN. It's a text field. I say TXT vehicle. That's the subject table it's in. dash VIN. That's how I name that field. If I had a memo field called notes, a long text field called notes, I could name it MEM vehicle dash notes, and so on. If I have an integer field in vehicle, that is basically the number of passengers. Since this is an integer, I could just say passengers, okay? Vehicle dash passengers. And that would be the number of passengers. So INT vehicle dash passengers. Again, just like naming our main objects, when you name fields, never put spaces in it. Never put a space in the name of the field. Always has to be one character string. So again, you'll see here that we will use short text, memo text, integers, long integers used on regular fields, foreign keys. What are the difference on some of these? Okay, an integer field would be like, oh, I've got numbers maybe up to like a million or something like that, or 10 million even. Okay, believe it or not, that's just a regular integer field. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up. Could be negative numbers too. It could be minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, but they are integers. Okay, and they could actually get pretty big. They could get, you could probably 10 million, 100 million, maybe even a billion, and it still would work at an integer. But at some level, the number gets so big that a simple integer field can't handle it anymore. You may have learned this when you learned C, okay, that it depends on the memory registers of the computer that you have. Uh, the type of the variable will take on different meanings. In order to have a number that overflows the regular size of the register, you actually have to say that the variable is like that so the computer program knows how to deal with it. Well, believe it or not, we have the same kind of thing happening in databases. We could have a field that's an integer value, and it's great up until a certain number, and then after that it can't handle that size number anymore because it's been tagged to be only one memory register. Okay, why is that important to us? It turns out that calculations on INT fields go a lot quicker than calculations on LNG fields, the long integer field. Okay, however, there are times when you have to use long integer. Okay, my rule of thumb has always been if I know it could get over 100,000, I usually use a long integer for the field. A lot of people would tell me nowadays you could probably go to a billion and it would be all right. But yeah, for the sake of the fact that I build databases where some people may be using old software or old computers, I tend to keep it integer up to up to 100,000 or so, or 99,999, I think is it. And then if it gives 100,000 or more, I go to lawn. Okay. Now there's another variant of the lawn. It's you still use LNG because it's still a lawn integer, but it's used on primary key fields to do nothing more than make a link to its child or its I'm sorry, tables that the table may be in relationship to. Again, I know you don't know what that means right now. You will as the class goes on. But basically, the auto number field that we will use for primary keys is a long integer field, and we'll use that. Okay, foreign key fields will also be long integer fields. Okay, doesn't matter what they're holding. You will always have to use long integers for those type of fields. And I say here, the long integer for the foreign key field. It's a special case. It will always have this format where it's LNG, whatever table is sending the information to it, and then the name record identifier. Okay, whereas the other long integers that you could define for your thing is just LNG, the table that it's in, and then any field name you want to give to it. So, for instance, on the vehicle, maybe I want to keep track of its mileage, and mileage could easily get over 100,000, go over 100,000. So I'm going to make it LNG vehicle dash mileage. So you can see passengers, I wouldn't have that many passengers in the car, probably 7 or 8 at the most, maybe it's a van, it could go to 15, I don't know. But I would never have 100,000 people in a car. That one I would be able to keep at INT, where this one would be LNG. I know I'm going a little bit beyond just telling you how the conventions work here, but this is okay. It's good to hear these things several times. It'll make more sense to you when we finally do work it as part of a tutorial. Now, one thing I want to point out to you, in some of my old examples, I used to use decimal when it was a real number. In other words, not an integer. Okay. Uh, it turns out Microsoft is now recommending not to use decimal, but instead use double. All right. It's interesting because you hardly ever use single. Single would be used for things like very low, numbers that you think are always going to be really low, like miles per gallon. It's 34, but it's not just an integer. It's 34.6 or something like that. Then you could use single, okay? But the truth is, there really isn't much difference these days between using single and using double. They both basically handle memory the same way. It'll only be on very old computers where this can make a difference, and only if you're doing a lot of calculations. Even on the integers nowadays, it really doesn't matter that much unless you're doing a lot of calculations. So I would just say that for any real number, and I should have wrote it here in the comments, any real number, it probably makes sense to use the one that's called double and use the DBL prefix on the name of the field. So DBL vehicle cost, for instance. Okay, it could be when and there. I mean, this isn't a very good one because typically cost would be a currency value. But if you opt to not make it currency, maybe you want to handle it as just a number. Well, see, that's the thing that's weird. Currency really is a number. I probably should use something else here beside cost. But let's say it was, what would be a good one? Uh, Well, here we had Oh, that was mileage. Yeah, the miles we put on the car. That could actually have been a decimal number too, couldn't it? Oh, I don't know. I said let's just round it up to the next integer. That's it. But if I wanted it to be decimal, if I wanted it to be real, I could have made it double. DBL vehicle mileage. That could be one that I could have had. That's mileage. Yeah, I'm having a hard time off the bat thinking of anything else that would be a number associated with a vehicle. Most of the other things I can think of are currency, the cost of things, basically. So, um, I don't know. Maybe it's. Jeez, it's coming really quick. Anyway, I think you get the idea. It would be something like mileage. If we wanted to have decimal mileage, we could do that here. So, um, the other field that we will see quite a bit is date time fields. Next to text fields, the fields you tend to see second most are date fields and number fields. In fact, I would say probably 99.9% of all fields you will ever create are either text, one of the numbers, either long, integer, or double, or date time. And when I say numbers, I'm also going to include the currencies on that because the truth is, currency fields are really just number fields. They just have an option. They have a symbol associated with it, which is like dollars or euros or whatever else. Okay, and they would be in there. Okay, so yeah, currency. I've often thought I should just group it with numbers, but since Microsoft actually gives you a type for it, we'll use it. So, for instance, if I'm using general currency, I could just say CUR. But if I want to actually make CUR, by the way, would be default to the American dollar. I should have said that in the comments here. I might go fix that up so I got that in there. Whereas I could have picked the euro and then I would prefix it with the EUR. Some people say, well, if this is dollar, why isn't it DOL? Yeah, you could if you want to. Feel free, But truthfully, CUR just indicates that you're using the default value for currency, which is US dollars. Euros, fixed currency. I don't know why they have these in here. Okay, these ones I would never use. I don't understand why they need have a scientific on currency or a percent or anything like that. Actually, I take it back. I do know why these are here. Okay, believe it or not, even though it falls in the currency field, these are not handled as currency. They're handled as another kind of number. Why Microsoft did this, I do not get. This ought to really be in the as a format for number, but for some reason they made it format for currency. Okay, I would not worry about this because it turns out in number fields, there's a way to make it. There's a property that will allow it to become percent scientific standards. So that's why I've redded these out. They're really not needed because these ones you can make that happen on those too. All right. Now, if you do on those and you want to use percent or science or I don't know, I guess that would be the two. If you wanted to use those on your naming, you could do that if you want to. Okay, I wouldn't take off points for that if it really was percentage. But truthfully, like I said, I think this gets you close enough that you could just use the ones that are in green. Again, the ones in reds we really want to try to avoid. Euro, yeah, I could see a lot of people might want to use euro. So, I leave it open. If you want to use euro for your currency, feel free to do that. But again, one of the other important ones is date and time. Okay. And I say this on a regular field, okay, because it turns out there's another kind of thing that you can use date and time on, but we're going to just use it in this class on on the fields of the table themselves. So date and time, it's an interesting field because it can hold dates, it can hold times, and it can hold dates and times together. It's prefixed with DTM. You again table and then the name of the name of the field. Okay, so say I have the sales data of the vehicle that I want to keep track of. In that vehicle subject table, then I could add a field that's DTM vehicle dash sale date. Now we will talk again when we build our first subject table. We'll talk a lot about these different types of fields and what you need to be concerned about and the different properties that you'll set and all that. But right now I just want to give you the essence of how you actually name those fields as you go through it. Another field that, and I got it here in yellow, but we will use it, is called the yes no field. It's what they call a binary field, meaning that the values of the field can only take on yes or no, or 0 and 1, or true or false, or plus and minus, or what basically the positive and the negative of the thing that we're talking about. Or it may not have any value at all. It may be null. Okay, it's those three values that a yes no field could typically take on. Okay, you can limit it so it has to take on some number if you want to, and we're going to learn how to set rules on fields to constrain them or to make them required and things like that as we go through the class. Actually, in the first lesson we'll learn that. But let's say I want to track if the vehicle is in commission. In other words, it's being used. Maybe this is a table for a company, and they're keeping track of the vehicles they have on site. Like forklifts and all that. Okay, and sometimes they take a vehicle out of commission for a while because it has to be serviced or something like that. Okay, so I want a field in here that's just going to track whether or not it's in commission, and you can use a yes/no field to do that. So again, YSN vehicle dash in commission. And usually on the yes no fields, I put a question mark at the very end of the field name. And again, another one of those things to indicate that we're really, it's about answering this question: is it in commission? All right. You don't have to do that, but I think it's pretty good practice to do that. Okay. Um, and I even say it place a question mark in the field name. But again, if you don't, I wouldn't take off points for that. But I do want you to have the YSN to indicate that it's a yes no field. Now, one of the reasons why this isn't green, even though we will use it quite a bit, okay, is the true. Later in the class, I'm going to tell you that this is really not the best way to handle a binary situation using the yes no field. Okay, it's kind of like currency, it's really a number field. Well, there's really another way that's better to do this. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit in lesson one, but we'll mainly talk about it toward the end of the class. When you understand databases better, I'll give you a little bit more about the type of things that you would want to do to make your database more efficient. And one of them is not use yes no fields. There's a field called Olay object. We will actually utilize it a couple times just so you can see how it's used. It was replaced by another field called an attachment field. So when it came in, and I really thought attachment fields were going to be really great and all that. Well, we have found that there's there's a lot of problems with attachment fields, and truthfully, it's yet like the yes no field. There's a better way to do it than having attachments. Okay, I'll explain what that is. But what an Olay object lets you do is have things like a picture. Store a picture in your record. Okay, again, toward the end of the class, I'll actually show you where I've used an Olay object to store a picture. You can do that, but the truth is, you should really use an attachment field to do that, to store things like a picture that's associated with the record. So, in other words, say I want to have a photo. This one I was using an example that, let's say I want to have a photo of the title of the vehicle. So I call it title copy. Okay. In other words, I've scanned it into a JPEG or bitmap or whatever. Okay. And now I want to actually make that, put that into a field that's on the record. I make a field called Olay vehicle dash title copy. And then I could actually go to the field and say, pull this in, and it'll actually take that JPEG and store it into the database. Okay. I'm not crazy about that. Now, again, when we get into the talking about the fields in lesson one, I'll tell you why I don't care for this too much, and even why I don't care for the attachment field. But if and when we do attach files to a record, we'll use attachment fields. That's this attachment ATT, and again. So for instance, maybe I have photos of the vehicle. I could say ATT vehicle dash photos. And then there's a field called a hyperlink. Again, something that Access gave you, something that I really don't like very much is the hyperlink field, but we will use it for a while. Later in the class, I'm going to show you a much better way of having a link as part of a record. Okay, but we will utilize hyperlink just to get started and for people to be able to understand that you can do things like this from a database. Okay, and it's prefixed with HYP table dash field, and you can see an example here: HYP vehicle dash website. So that's good, right? We have a subject form. Okay, now I'm moving into forms, the different kinds of forms we have. And again, I'm not going to go through all these. I think you get them now, all right? Subject form will be a form for a subject table, basically. So we have our table vehicle, and now I want to have a form to help me populate and manage the data. I'll create a form that's called FRM vehicle. I could do, there, you can make data sheets. We won't do that in this class. I will show you at the end, though, how you can do that, okay? Because some people will get really good at this and they'll want to actually have the flexibility to sometimes bring things up as a data sheet, and you can actually do that, okay? But truthfully, there's even a better way of doing that. And again, that's why I made that yellow. Lookup forms, we'll make those a lot, and we'll always make those from the BOWL object for a lookup form, and it will always have a similar format that we have to a lookup table where we have a receiver and the category information in the name. Okay, so again, we had a category, a lookup table called vehicle type. We could have a lookup form called vehicle type. Dialogues, we will make those toward the end of the class. Switchboards will make it toward the end of the class. I have a couple message forms that will pop up later in some, and by then you'll understand exactly what this means. There's this thing called the split form in Access. I used to use it a bit. I'm decided it's got way too much incompatibility with the ribbons, so I've stopped using it. And again, I know you don't know what that means, but again, I'll point that out as we go through class what that means. And so we won't use a split form. I should have made this red actually. And then these other ones, parameter forms, global forms, we won't have a need for those at all. I don't know why anybody'd even want to use them. Navigation forms we won't use in this class, but I will show you how examples where I've used them myself. They're more advanced, and again, I think some people who really pick up this class and run with it and get to understand it may find those very interesting. Pivot charts and pivot tables, it's an interesting thing. They were retired in Access 2013. I don't think I have, yeah, I actually do. Toward the end of the class, I have some examples where I have those in there, but we won't be able to do them in this class. Well, it turns out in the most recent version of Access, I think Access 2019, they reintroduced them. All right. We will not cover them in this class. There are better ways of doing it than do it in Microsoft Access. And we'll talk about that toward the end when I talk about how you can link your databases to other things like Excel and Power BI and Tableau and things like that. Okay. Wizard forms are if you want to actually go in and do like truth maintenance and create your own wizards, you could do that. I actually have an example when we do the supplemental class where I show more advanced things where I actually have wizard forms that I've created. We will create subforms though, and there's subforms for supplemental tables and there's subforms for junction tables. Again, we'll get into that when we get to that point, but this is how you name them. Here's some examples of it, okay? There, you can create an auxiliary subform. I don't do this very often, okay? Unless it's only if I know I'm going to have a lot of records in my database and I may want to handle auxiliary a little bit differently, okay? But typically, your auxiliary fields, you're just going to combine them in a query and make it part of uh, the record source for a subject form or whatever form it has an auxiliary on this table. All right, typically it's a subject table. Don't worry about that too much. Again, we'll see that, and that really is going to enter toward like lesson 6. I think we get into this a little bit, and then I think that's it for forms. One of the other objects we'll create a lot of is reports. There, it's mainly subject reports, and then reports that are associated with queries. These other reports incredibly rare. At the end, I'm going to show you how to build a label report. But it's one of those things that just kind of falls out of the sky. You'll know it so well by then. It's almost all I have to do is mention how to do it, and you really know how to do it. So, yeah, you're going to really learn a lot of cool stuff in this class, and it's amazing how much this will become second nature to you doing this stuff. I know it sounds overwhelming right now. It really truly is not. You will get very used to doing these things. You're going to see it you'll see it in all my tutorials. You'll see it in all the examples for this class. You'll begin to understand this really quick. Event macros are prefixed with MCR, and that's all I'm going to say about those for now. We won't do modules, but I will talk about when you might want to use a module and actually show you some that I've done in the past. But we won't need to use those in this class. We will create select queries, and when we do, they're usually on subjects or they're ordered to create some kind of what we call a join. So again, I'm not going to get into this very much other than to show you this is the naming conventions for our different kinds of queries that we have in the class. And so so all these the major objects, the tables, the tables, the forms, the reports, the macros, and the queries, and in this case it's the select queries. And if you were to create a module, but you wouldn't have to do that in this class, those things you must name. You must name those. Access is not going to generate those names for you. You will use a BAL object usually, not always. Some of the queries you will create from scratch, okay? And the subject report, the reports you'll create from scratch. But forms and tables uh, are made from BAL objects. So you'll have those. And you will create from those BAL objects. You will always have names for the major objects. The other things you will always name are the fields of your tables. You must use the naming conventions there. And again, when you use the BAL objects, some fields are in there with there, and some templates are in there, and you'll just utilize those templates and modify them to be the real name of the thing you want. So if you went in there and you saw uh, for instance, on the alternate key, txt table or subject dash alternate key field, you would replace the subject with the subject's name and the alternate key field with whatever you want to call it. So this happens to be the alternate key field for the table, the vehicle identification number. It's unique and it's required. So I would replace the alternate key template in the subject table with vehicle dash VIN. It has the TXT on it already, but you have TXT vehicle dot VIN. That's what you replace it with. Getting a little bit ahead of myself. You'll see this again when we uh, do the first problem, right? There are some things that you will name if you need to, and those are mainly the controls of the database. In the controls of the database, when you create a control, when you drop in a control into a form or into a report, Access will give it a default name that is meaningless. All right, I'll say something like text 32 or something like that. It means nothing, but it is the name of the control. That's fine, except if you actually need to reference that. Now, what does referencing mean? Reference means that somewhere I have something like an equation where I'm using the value of that control or whatever the thing that I'm referencing as a variable. Basically, I have the name of the control as a variable, and that variable, whatever value that control takes on, that's what that variable's value becomes. All right. So let's say, and again, I know you won't know what this means, but let's say I have a text box control. All right. You'll see it right down here. It's one of the biggest ones you'll make. It could be prefix CTX or CTB. Okay, you tend to see it mainly use CTX. Okay, again because they used to be called just text before, but now so CTX. This is another one where you have two options for how to name it. But CTX. Okay, so let's say the the field that's or the expression that's bound to that. Okay, and I know this doesn't make any sense to you right now, but when we get into utilizing controls, I'll make sense of this for you. Okay, let's say I have a text box control called vehicle identification number. Okay, then I want to call that, and I need to refer to that somewhere. I need a macro that actually finds the value for that. Okay, in fact, usually I wouldn't do that if the underlying field is text. Okay, it's usually the underlying field is a number. So let's pretend that we have a text box control, and the underlying field for that text box control is a double. Okay. Now, yeah, I know this is text. And well, I had text field. Okay, text box controls can be on top of. This is one of the things that causes some grief with students. Text box controls aren't just on text. They could be on they're basically just a little it's a field that will be on the form that you could put information in, and you could put and the information you could put in there is alphanumeric, okay? But if the field that it's attached to is number, it won't accept the alpha characters. It will only accept numeric. Okay, so let's say we have a text box control that's on the mileage field. Okay, the integer field for mileage. Okay, so what I would have here is the name of that field was vehicle dash mileage. Now I know it was prefixed with int. Okay, this is where you don't have to have that prefix. Okay, if you want to, you can. Okay, but what we would do is we would say CTX vehicle dash mileage, and then that would we would know then that that is referencing the mileage. If you wanted to use int on there, you could say CTX and then in parentheses say int vehicle dash mileage. I let you do whatever one you want to do. Typically, when you name a field, there's usually not another field that has the same field identifier on it. Although it could happen. It could happen that you have different, the same field type name, or I'm saying field identifier using different prefixes. But it's an incredibly rare thing, okay? And when it happens, I usually tell students try to give it a different field name. Don't have the same field name twice in the same table, even if it does have different prefixes on it, okay? Do something else to make the identifier of the field unique, okay? Don't change the table name, but change the name of the field itself, okay? So anyway, a little side note on that while I was thinking about it. But the text box controls, so again, I could say CTX vehicle dash mileage because even though it's integer mileage, I'm only going to have vehicle mileage in there once, okay, as a field. But if I wanted to, I could say CTX and then in parentheses say INT vehicle dash mileage. I hope that makes sense. I'll show you it sometime anyway. But when I do it, I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to things like that. I'd rather just say CTX vehicle color, vehicle mileage, whatever it is, okay, whatever I'm dealing with that's attached to this text box, okay. And then later on, say I have another field where I want to say if the mileage was over 80,000, put a message on the screen that says high mileage car or something like that. Well, now I can refer to this text box by calling out the name I gave it. Okay. Again, Access, when it creates that text box, is going to call it TXT or text 99 or whatever it wants to call it. All right. If I had that expression and I referred to text 99 and I get an error later on, I got to figure out where text 99 was used. Okay, and your databases are going to get really big. You're going to have a lot of tables with a lot of fields, and then suddenly you get an error. Maybe it just never happened before when you were testing it out, but later on you're using the thing. You get this text 99. Now you got to try, where did I use text 99? What control was that on? What control and what form was that on? Or what report was it on? And all that. Hard to figure that out. But if you had named it CTX vehicle color, well, I know that's in the vehicle table, and I need to go find the text box that's associated with the color of it or the mileage of it or whatever you're doing. This is the strength of having these naming conventions. They really help you speed up the amount of effort you need in order to debug problems in your database. Okay, I know it takes a little bit of typing to do this. You'll get used to it. Trust me, it is worth a few extra seconds of typing in order to save you sometimes tens of hours trying to debug things. In the old days before I had the naming conventions and students were able to just name things whatever they would, it was an absolute nightmare for them. They were spending at least 80% of their time on any homework assignment debugging things because they could not figure out where they were. After we adopted the naming conventions, that got sliced to just a minor amount. I rarely will have a student come back to me telling me that it took them hours and hours and hours to figure out why they were having a problem. They usually know within minutes, where the thing is happening, and just knowing where it happens usually gets you enough in the ballpark that you can figure it out. And it really helps us if you come to us and ask for help in that if we think you've really tried to do this right, you've named them correctly, and you're still getting problems and all that, then it helps us understand where it was happening too. So definitely take the time to do this. I'm not asking you to do it. I'm telling you to do it. All right. In this class, you will do these things, or else we just won't grade it. You'll get a 0. That's all there's to it. So, very important. Now, I'm going to call that part 1. I know it went a little while. Okay. Those of you who want to hang on, I'm actually going to try to build a little tiny database using some of this stuff, just so you can see how it happens. Again, if you don't want to watch the second part, we will cover it in tutorials in lesson 1, and you'll do it in the homework assignment too. But I just want to give you an essence of what I mean here when I talk about substituting for names and all that, and using the proper naming convention. So I've got the bowl. Okay, you won't even see this until the very end of the class, but this is the full bowl. All the objects that we'll deal with in this class are in this file right here, right now. Okay, the one we'll be dealing with right away is our subject table. Okay, so I'm going to use the bowl object here to create a new subject table. I'll do, since we started with, no, let's do something different. You got to see. Vehicle, I think we use student in the other one. What would be another good thing to do? I'll tell you what, let's do one for furniture. I'm going to do furniture, okay? So I'm going to go in here and copy this because I don't want to destroy my original object, and paste it in. I'm going to make a TBL. See, it's already gotten the prefix TBL, and I want to replace the subject, including the curly brackets, with furniture. And I know furniture could be either singular or plural, but we're going to use it in the singular method. Every record in this table is going to represent a piece of furniture. So let's say OK. All right, now you've got it right here. I'm going to open this up. If I open, again, you can double click it and open up in the datasheet view. There's nothing to see in datasheet right now. We haven't designed it. So I'm just going to go right in and open it in design view. And you can see this is the information for it. Now, if you come over here, you see right away, if you don't have the property sheet open, all you have to do is click this and it opens it up. And you'll see there's a curly brackets here that says subject. This is just a description. It really does nothing in your database, but if later on you want to print out the database, you could actually print it's kind of a listing of the database, and you want to have this subject stand out, you just go in there and replace subject with furniture. That's the name, what I called it in its name. All right, and then now when that prints out, it'll say furniture, and then it'll have a list of all the stuff that goes with the table furniture. Okay. I don't require that you do that, but it's good practice to do that on all your tables, is to go out and give it a description that means something. On fields, you will give descriptions, by the way. All right, and captions. So anyway, let's get in here. Okay, you have a record. You have a field that's called AUT star dot record identifier. As I will point out over and over in class, you never do anything to that. You leave it just as it is. If I go up to the indexes, you'll see that it's already the primary key of this field. It's just fine. You don't have to name this anything different. Just leave it as it is, okay? A lot of people will come in here and say, well, you said, have the name of the table in here. I'm going to put furniture. No, don't do that, okay? These fields that have just star on it, never change those. Never rename them. Never do anything to them, okay? Those are called the standard fields. Later on, when we build forms, you will see that there's already a page and a control for notes, a page and control for data revisions. They link to these fields. If you change it here, those forms won't work. The auth star dash record identifier, as you will hear over and over in class, that is our primary key. It is the most important field in your table. It identifies the record, and it allows records to be linked to other records in relationships. So you never want to mess this up. Every table you build will have this as the first field in the table template. You never want to change that. Okay, but a field I do want to change, I'm going to drag this over so you can see it better, but is the alternate key field. I go up to indexes right now and you'll see there is an alternate key in here, but it's just this cryptic. What is that? It's nothing because I haven't defined it yet, really. Okay, but it's holding the place for me. It's a placeholder for me. You can see too the primary key had showed it was primary. This is an alternate key. It doesn't show it as primary, but does show it as unique. It's a single field. It would be what you would use if you had a single field alternate key. If I click on it, you see its properties. You'll see that one of its properties is it's indexed yes, no duplicates like it should be. We want to have unique values in there and we want it to be required. Therefore, it is not null. And I give a message on here that will modify to make it real. Okay. So a lot of this field, a lot of your single field alternate key is done for you now. You don't have to do anything to it, okay? Except give it a good name, all right? So, what's its name? What's the subject of the table? Furniture. What's the alternate key field name? Well, that's up to me. I could say something like name, as long as every piece of furniture I have has a unique name, that would be fine. Maybe my furniture has a serial number on it. I could do that. I doubt it does, But I need to come up with since I want a single field alternate key, I need to think of something that will be unique for each piece of furniture. I'm going to say that I will always give it a unique name. All right. So in other words, I will never just call it chair. I may call it uh, the the purple chair, the purple reading chair or something like that. Something weird. Just in order so that it's unique compared to another chair that I might have in the house. Okay, those are things that you could do in order to make your database a little bit more friendly. But you just got to make sure that it's unique and required. Okay, and here in the description, it says it's got the curly brackets. I'm going to do the same thing. Now, you may notice the alternate key field is just called name. I'm going to call that, just say name. Now, I could say furniture name. That'd be fine too. Let's see. This is just a description of this field. When they cursor into the field in the data sheet or in a form, in the subject form or whatever they're using to actually enter data or manage data, when they cursor into it, you see down here where I've got, it says design view, F6 switch and all that, you'll see whatever you wrote here. Okay, so I have a cursor in that field and you'll see furniture name will come up down here. I know you're not seeing that now. I'll go back to the data sheet later on and you'll see that that's what happens down here. But that's what the description is. I know it says optional, but we will always put it in there. And you can see what I did is I also put dash dash unique and required, just a visual cue to the end user that they really need to put something in here and it needs to be unique. Okay. In the caption, I want to have the name of that field. Again, I can make it I could just say a name because that's what I named it here. Or I can make it furniture name. Don't make it this whole thing furniture dash name. Okay. Again, this was the subject. This is the alternate key field name, really. So when I say alternate key field, that's what I'm replacing with. So I could just say name, or I could go and say furniture name. It's up to you. And if you want to make them both capital, you can have spaces here. Okay, again, you can have it in the field name itself. Okay, I have a validation rule is not null. You must, and I got a message that comes up if that's violated. In other words, they tried to save the net record and they didn't have a value in it. You must enter a name. I could say name, or I could say a furniture name. Remember, this is a message that's coming on the screen, so make it readable. That's how it would read. Don't make these capital, or unless you want them to stand out, then you could, but there you go. Okay, and the rest of this stays the same. Again, it's already indexed for me. Okay, again, alternate keys are the only things we will need to index in this class, And it's only single field alternate keys that will need index, and they'll always be yes, no duplicates. All right. Now, uh, I did want to point out though, don't forget, I know I'll mention this in class, but you'll hear from me that it is possible to have multiple alternate single field alternate keys. And in fact, it's possible to have multiple alternate keys, whether they're single or multiple field. Okay, and again, we'll talk about that when we talk about keys. But if I was to put a second alternate key in here, I would need to index that yes no duplicates. So that's the only other time that you probably need to send another index in a table is if you have a second alternate key or other alternate keys. Okay, you don't have to worry about on the primary key. It's already set for you again. Yes no duplicates. You never want to set any other field to be indexed. And again, at the end of the class, I will show you when you may want to do that. Okay, because again, I didn't mean to get into this too much, but you've got three options. You've got no, which is what you'll have on most fields that you design. You'll have yes, no duplicates, which is what's highlighted right now because I'm on the primary key field, and that's appropriate for primary keys and for alternate keys. Uh, but then yes, duplicates okay. Rare. You could. I'm sorry. It's not that rare. It happens, but it happens for very specific reasons, and we'll get into those reasons to the end. We will not have to worry about it in any of the examples that we do in this class. All right. So this is nice. I actually already start. You got a little bit of a table. I'm going to save it right now, and I'm going to go out to our view, and you can see I've got that furniture name alternate key field now, and I've got the notes. And you may have noticed on the cap now. Watch, I'll move into this field here, and boy, it didn't do it from a data sheet. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. I know on forums this works, but this should be saying what's in the description right now, and it's not. I apologize. There is something that is not quite right in data sheets. I have found out. This is one of them. One of the things. Okay, it should be showing me down here a description for that field. I wonder if I minimize this, if it will do it. No, it's still not doing it. I wonder why that is. See, even when I start typing, it doesn't do it. Oh well. Yeah, but when you're in forums, I know it works. I've got a lot of examples that would show the description then, okay? But you do notice in the name, it's got more than just the field name. It's also got the stuff. That's because I put it there. I put it there in the template. You go in here to, it says furniture name. It says unique and required. I put that there. Uh, this one doesn't say anything except record identifier because you can't change it anyway. And this one says freeform text, meaning that you can put whatever you want into that field. Same thing with data revision field. You can do whatever you want in that field. Okay, but I want more than that. I want to keep track more than just the name of the furniture. So I'll say maybe the cost. Okay, let's make that a currency field, and I'll say furniture cost. So that's a number field, and its field size is double. This is a currency. Okay, so you got the same situation with currency. You get to pick what you want it to be. Okay, either integer, double, decimal. Again, I would say it's either going to be integer or double typically. Okay, I can't imagine why you wouldn't have a long number here. I guess if it's a huge cost number, you could. Okay. By the way, if you want to be safe, if we were doing an integer here, if you want to be safe and use long, I wouldn't take off points if it's always going to be if I know it's going to be all short all the time. Okay. Most of the time, I'll let you know what I want you to make it. Okay. But this one, if you wanted to make it long integer, say I wanted this to be an integer field, I'm sorry, an integer currency, that'd be fine. Oh, you know what? I did that wrong, didn't I? I'm sorry. I picked number to begin with. I was going to say, those shouldn't be there. Okay, that's right. I thought, boy, was there a change in axis that I didn't know about? It's a currency field. And now when I look at it, I get the right format. Sorry about that, okay? And I could say currency, and that's US dollars. Man, let's make it euros. Let's have fun. We'll make it euros, okay? And if I'm going to make it euros, let's change that to be, instead of CUR, let's make it EUR for euros. That's its prefix. And I'll say cost, let's make it furniture cost in euros. Do the same thing. Again, I don't have to say furniture. I could just say cost here because I'm in the subject. It really isn't needed, but it's okay to be redundant. And I can even say in euros since I'm using curly brackets on the others. No, I'll do it this way. In euros. Oops. Okay. And I'm going to put a validation rule. I'm not going to say I don't want this to be a required field, but I do want to limit him. I don't want it to be a negative number. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to 0. Price must be positive. And I'm even going to put a default, well, his default value is 0 in there already. Okay, that's good. That means when the record comes up, it'll come up with a cost of 0 by default. All right, that's good, and I'll put it up there with the rest of them. Let's see, I highlight that, and then I move it up there like that. Good. Let's do one more field. Let's see, what's a good fun? Let's do something fun. Let's see, we got text, and we got kind of a number. We got currency. Let's do a date. That's it. DTM furniture date purchase. There's a good one because it's got two words in it. So not data purchase, date purchase. Okay. Date purchased. Okay. And again, this is about a piece of furniture. Okay. So don't read this as if it's plural. Okay. I'm not talking about the cost of all the furniture. I'm talking about for a particular piece of furniture, the record for this furniture. So the date I bought this piece of furniture, we'll make it a date time field. And furniture purchase date. And you know what? I want this to be in a certain format too. I'm fix that too since I've been using parentheses. Let's do this in euros. I always like to give information in the description and caption. It's all. Sometimes it's good for me because sometimes I'll build the table and then not build the form for another couple weeks, and then when I go use it, then I remember, oh yeah, that was in euros. It wasn't in dollars, stuff like that. So it's worthwhile for me too. Purchase date. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it month, date. Let's do that. Month, date, year. Okay, month, date, and the 4-digit year. That's how I want that to look like. Okay, and this so happens that's a format called short date. Right there. Okay, I'll tell you about date formats when we do the thing, but you could actually define your own if you want to. Okay. I won't need an input mask for this because I'm actually going to use the date picker on this. I have a date picker come up. In other words, a little calendar that they can pick from, but they could type it in themselves too. Okay, so furniture purchase date, and I'm going to say that is in month, date, year. Okay, that's the caption now. And I'm actually going to put a rule on this. I want to make this required. I want to make this a required field that we're going to say what date that was purchased. Truthfully, in practice, I probably wouldn't make this a required field, but just for the sake of doing this, I'm going to show you it, okay? So I'm going to say that this, it could have been purchased, oh, let's say up to 10 years, let's say 10 years ago, okay? Well, let's make it 20 years. 20 years ago, I purchased this. So how long ago was 20 years ago? Well, we have let's say for sake of argument, we'll use 366 as the number of days in a year times 20 years. We get 7,320. All right. So I'm going to say 7,320. Let's remember that. First off, it's a required field, so is not null and between date function, which would return today's date, minus what was it, 7,320? No, I'm just going to round that up to 7,500. Let's say 7,500 days ago. Okay, between 7,500 days ago and today, date. Okay, so this is the date function. I'm going, and it always comes back in, evaluates to days. So I'm going to take 7,500 anytime in the last little over 20 years up until now. I could do that. Now consider that's a dynamic thing. If I wanted to anchor that date, if I wanted to say January 1st, 2022 or something like that, I could have done that. Okay. In fact, I'll do that just so you could. Well, no, I do that in class. I show you how to put a literal date in here. But this is a nice way to show you a dynamic date. This is dynamic now. It's only going to let me go back 7,500 dates. So tomorrow, this will all move up one date. The day's date will move up one date. Okay. Um, uh, make it very understandable. Purchase date must be between 20 years ago and today. Something like that. Okay, that's the message that will pop up on the screen if they violate this now, okay? The other thing I want to do is maybe I'm really good about the day I buy the thing, I actually put a record in here typically, okay? So I could give it a default value of today. And now that's going to go in there automatically when I create a record. It's kind of cool too. I could override that, by the way. I mean, it's going to stuff the date in there, but I could go in there and change that, the actual piece of data. So I think that's done. Let's save it. Oh, I better move this up to where it's needed. Okay, I'm going to put it right after the cost. Let's do a yes/no field since I was talking about them really quick. Okay, and so now I'm going to do a yes/no field. Let's say that this is a piece of furniture that I've decided I'm going to give away. Okay, so I'm going to say, yeah, give away. Maybe that's the, I'm going to make it simple as that. Yes, no. Furniture. Give away. Now, I would only have a field like this if I wasn't actually saying who I was giving it away to. If I had a field that said who give away to, once it gets a number, then I know I'm giving it away, right? So I don't need to necessarily have this field then. I'm only going to have this if I don't have anything else about giving it away. Okay, maybe it gave away. Maybe that's the thing. If I had this piece of furniture, but I gave it away. That's a good one to do. All right. I'm not saying who I gave it away to. Again, if I wanted to have that, I could have a text field, furniture, a recipient, maybe call it. And if that takes on a value, then I know I gave it away. I don't need this then. It would be redundant. It'd be information that doesn't mean anything. Worse, it could be information that could become contradictory if I said I didn't give it away and yet I have a person that I gave it to, right? So I would only use this if I wasn't naming the person I was giving it to or anything like that, or the date I gave it away or anything like that. So that's why I don't like yes no fields. I really think there are better ways of doing things all the time. But let's say yes no, and you can see it comes up, and I put a caption on it too. Um, gave furniture away. Get that question mark there. Okay, good enough. Okay, I don't even need a validation rule on here because I don't want this to be a required field, right? Because if I didn't give it away, well, see, this is one of the things that's weird about yes no fields. This is another reason I don't like them. If I say is required, you click on it and you make it no. Um, you can't ever reset it back to null. I'm going to say we're not going to do this. We're just going to leave that as it is. So I have to look at my notes to make sure. I know there's something about the third state that I'm forgetting here. But anyway, let's go here and move that up. Okay, and again, I could have many, many, many other fields. We're just not going, this is good enough for demonstration purposes. The whole reason I did this was to show you how you actually name your fields. Okay, so we got text field. I could look at this right away. Text field, I got a currency field, it's euro. Date time field, I got a yes, no field. And if I had this in okay, let's do that too. I'm here. And you've watched this far. Let's watch a little bit more. Okay, it's always a lot of fun. We're learning a little bit of things. So I'm going to take that one. I'm going to save it as it is. If I go and open up in data sheet view, you can see I've got a data sheet, and I could start putting, see how the euros came up with a euro in front of it and all that. That's cool. Gave furniture away is just this checkbox. It knows to do things like that. Okay, the furniture purchase date, it came up with today's date in it. It's ready for when this record's created. It's going to have that in there unless I change it. And you see when I go into that field, it actually pulls up the scene. I've got the calendar because I said turn that on, okay? And it's putting today's date in it. So I could come right here. I could do the whole thing. Maybe purple chair, purple chair. And I'm going to say it cost me 125 euros. I'm cheap. I got throwaway furniture. Today's date is good. Well, no, maybe I bought it, last week. Maybe I bought it on 8/07/2022. And whoops, what happened? Oh, I got two symbols in there. It doesn't like that. There you go. Okay. Hey, if I violated that, let's say I violate that. Let's say I put 2000, right? Longer than 20 years ago. Must have it in those dates. I better fix that. So, okay, we're good. Gave furniture away. Yeah, it was a nice chair, but I didn't like it. I could put whatever notes I want to in here. Okay, you get the idea. It was new on this date. I automatically stamped that for you. And go on to the next one. Everything was copacetic. We didn't violate any keys, so let's go on and keep entering data if I want to. Okay. Let's say I'm going to create a form for that. So I do the same kind of thing. I go to the subject form, design view. Oh, I'm sorry. Always make a copy of these. Don't ever work with the ball objects directly. Okay, copy. And so this is going to be the form for that table. So form for furniture. And don't worry about all this. I'm going to do some things now that you haven't learned yet, but that's okay. Watch me as I go through it. Just to set this up, okay? I'm going to connect it to that table. I'm going to call it furniture. And I'm going to fix this to be furniture too. Now it's done. Okay. I'm going to go up here. You know what? I'm not going to set that right now. We will typically set this when we do this. We set the, is it that big a deal? I could do it probably. let's see, it was furniture name that got this. So I'm doing this different than how you would typically do it in class. I'm just more used to doing it this way. Furniture, close it down. So I want to make this furniture now. I want to make this furniture. I want to make this steel. This is my alias. It's the furniture name, the alternate key. I take this one out and I close her down. Yep, it's fine. Okay. And I'm going to save it really quick while I've got that. And now I'm going to dump in some. You see here, I've got to already have a thing called notes and data revision. Those are linked to those fields, mem star data revision and mem star notes. So I don't have to do anything there. I'm just going to have this one in front here where I'm going to drop in some fields. I don't ever have to drop that one, but I do have to drop the ones I don't have in here, and I'm just going to throw them in here like that. Okay, and I know they're ugly. I'm just going to move this around a little bit so you see it better. Furniture name, furniture cost, furniture purchase date, and giveaway. Why I put that first? It's interesting. I would think it would come up like this. Okay, and I'll drag these to where they belong. I'm not going to make this pretty or anything. I'm just giving you an idea how this all works. But anyway, you saw that the only thing I really needed to rename on this was the object itself, the form object itself. You didn't have to do any other naming here per se, okay? But if I wanted to refer to one of these, maybe the cost, for instance, then I'd have to go back and rename this, okay? And if I come in here and look at its properties, you'll see it's called Euro Furniture Cost. It takes on the name of the field that's underneath it, unless you want it to be something else, okay? So this is a text box. I would probably call it CTB. So I would change that. So again, I only do this if I'm going to refer to it from somewhere. And I'll do that. I'll build a field that I refer to it. So I'm going to go in here right now and build a whole new field that's not bound to anything. These are bound to the fields in the other form. This is unbounded right now. Okay. And I'm going to say expensive. And maybe I want a rule that says if it's over $100, €100, I'm going to consider it expensive. So I'm going to go in here right now, and I'm going to have a conditional formatting for that. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. I'm going to make an expression for it. So I'm going to go up here and do a control source and add an expression that says, how do I do this now? I got to think about this. If and now I need the name of that control. So you always indicate the name of a control or a field by putting a square bracket in. And I called it CTB. And you can see as I started doing that, it found anything that it knows about that has that beginning. And now I can just double click off of it. That's another reason why the naming conventions are so cool. It helps you, it keeps you from typing bad things if you've named things correctly. Okay, I'm going to say if it's greater than or equal to 100, then I'll say yes. If let's make it big capital letters. Yes. Otherwise, I'll say no. And again, this is just for fun. We wouldn't really do this in real life. I think that should work. All right. And there are other things I would do, like turning off the ability to come in here and all that, and uh, you won't be able to change its value anyway, even though you can come in here, But for now, I'm just going to save this. Oops. Set value macro cannot be run. Oh, I forgot to enable this whole thing. Let's figure. Well, you see, it worked anyway. I forgot to enable this. Always remember to enable your files. So enable all my content. Okay. Yeah, while I was there, because I always beat up on students how to do it too. I ought to make sure that this follows good flow. So I'm going to go in here and on this tab, look at the tab order. Whoops, wrong thing. I got it. Select that one. There you go. Okay, now tab order. Furniture name cost, per see how this one that I added is at the end. I want to put that after the cost, okay? So that when I cursor, it goes from bam, bam, bam. Okay, truthfully, I would turn this off too, okay? It's just just doing what we're calling deriving a value. Okay, it's not actually storing it in the table anywhere. It's just basically making a calculation and giving me the results of the calculation. So now when I open this up, and you can see that thing I did with the query. That's what it's doing here. It's telling me what I have that I could go. I only have one record in here, so it's only showing one record. But if I had multiples, you would see the name of each piece of furniture there, and I'd be able to go there right away. But here I got the purple chair, and it's over 100 euros. Yeah, let's enter a new one. Let's call it the pink chair, and it only costs 50 euros. And you see what happened right away? It says no, that's not expensive. I'll leave today's date, and we didn't give that one away. Go on and put another one in there. Uh, Big bed. It cost 1,000 euros, and yeah, it's expensive. And maybe I bought that a long time ago. See, this is if it's years ago, I don't want to sit there and zip through the whole thing. If it was recent, then it's worthwhile. But say I bought that in 2015, I would just do that then. Okay, something like that. Anyway, you get the idea. And then when they go on to the next one after that, that's in there now, that record. I go up here to the top and I click and I see the ones I just added are in here too. And by the way, they come up in alphabetical order too. So I go back to the purple chair if I want to, or I got that. We're going to learn all this kind of stuff, but I just wanted to show you the naming of objects, files, fields, and like I said, special cases where we might have to name a control. Okay, I did not go back and name all these controls because I'm only referring to it from this one right here. But those are the three conditions that we would use in naming conventions now. So we're going to leave it at that, and again, you're going to see a lot more of this as we go through class. But again, I cannot emphasize enough, you must use the naming conventions. Objects, tables, forms, reports, queries, macros, you will name those appropriately. Fields of tables, you will name those appropriately. In the case where you have a control or something else even in the database that you're referencing, you need to name the thing that's being referenced, okay? So usually a control, and that will take care of it. So anyway, thanks for hanging in there. I know this has been a long one, but it's also a worthwhile one. Get to know this stuff. Read RA. Keep it out. I would print it out and keep it with you as you're doing your work. It's got a wealth of information in it. Again, we also, in the lesson, in each lesson, the second section says conventions on it. It will be the conventions that are for that lesson. So I actually went in and said, these are the ones you really need to be concerned about for this lesson, and I put them in there. It's not like you use them in that lesson and then you never use them again. From that point on, you're going to use them, okay? But they kind of enter into the picture in that lesson. So when you read the L documents, you'll see that section C that has the conventions for that lesson. So anyway, thanks very much, and go out and look at the other videos that you have to absorb to get ready for the class.